Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me today on this episode of Dynamo Shorts. Today we're going to be talking about how we can associate scope boxes that are already within our model to a whole bunch of views at once. We're going to be using an instance parameter of our views to filter them down so that we can essentially grab them as a group and then specify the name of the scope box to associate to that group. Gonna go ahead and get started. As you can see here, I have already set up all of my part plans and I have in my scope boxes here. So zone A, zone B scope boxes, and I have all of my dependent views already set up. You didn't see the random Revit with Danamo episode on Revit view setup. Make sure you check that out. Link is down below. So once we have all of that, we can go ahead and open up Dynamo Player. It's in our Manage tab, of course. Get this guy over here. It's somewhat easy to see. And we want this Views Scope Box set up. And just to demonstrate how this guy actually is going to be used so that we can go ahead and get started and create it, knowing exactly what it is that we're going to make. So you can see here, we're going to specify the instance parameter of views to filter by. Typically, by default, we're going to use the view name, right? So you can see here that just the standard old view name associated to that view. But maybe our user is using the title on sheet value or some other parameter, right? Just using information within the model. So they can actually specify a separate parameter if they'd like. We're going to use it at view name. Then we can specify the common value of the specified views to set with the scope box, right? Zone A. And then the scope box to set to the views. So if we run this, there we go. If we scroll down, we have some reporting built in and our outputs. And of course, here I'm in Revit 2023 with the new Dynamo player. You can see that it updated all 9 of my Zone A views, or views that have Zone A in the view name, and gives me a list of those views. So let's go ahead and update this, right? I want the views with Zone B and not with Zone A, right? Now, one thing I want to show you guys here is that if it reports an empty list, it's rather than reporting an empty list, which for our Revit users can sometimes be very ambiguous, we actually say, ensure scope box with name specified exists, right? So I can say, oh, I need to actually update this, update that to Zone B, run it, and there we go. If I go and look at my Zone B views now, you can see they have been updated and now reflect the Zone B scope box. So once again, just essentially building in some additional output logic so that we get some additional information to our user rather than nulls or empty lists, which is just going to further confuse our Revit users. So let's go ahead and open up Dynamo and we can start this script fresh, show you guys exactly how I created it. So I'm just going to go ahead and close out a Dynamo player and open up Dynamo. Start a new script here. And once again, working with the Dynamo 2.13 inside of Revit 2023. Now, anytime that I'm working with categories inside of Revit, rather than using the categories drop-down list, I actually do categories by name, which allows you to specify a string. Very common for my workflows. And essentially why I do this is because in each version of Revit, there's a varying list of categories. So this will jump with the drop down. So I am actually hardwiring it so that it's always used. neither here nor there, just a different way of getting your categories. Then, of course, I want to get the all elements of that category, right? So just like I would with a Revit schedule, right? I have now produced a list of all 70 of my views within my project, right? I could also use the search over here within the library. I am simply right-clicking within the canvas to search. The search on the left is actually somewhat nice to use for newer users. If I search over here, just for categories, you can see it actually tells me where in the library I can find this node. So under the Revit package, under selection. So if I look under Revit and selection, here are all the ways that I can select elements within Revit and Dynamo, right? So all elements of family, all elements at level, etc. You can also simply click the selection name or the category name underneath of the node in order to get to that section of the library. This is really great, especially if you're having a hard time finding what you need or a particular node for what you need, because this allows you to see all of the nodes, in particular the out-of-box nodes that essentially interface with that element or that category of elements that you need. So once I have all of my elements of my view category, one thing that I like to do is clean it. You can see that I'm actually getting some null values. This is because not just views that we think of as views get reported within Dynamo. Schedules, view templates, and even the project browser gets reported here. So I'm just going to use right-click and use a list clean. If I could click it. And here I am actually going to turn this to false. You can see if I hover over it to preserve the indices, it is defaulted to true. That wouldn't do anything to my list. It would leave 18 as 18, not what I want. So I'm going to throw a Boolean in here with false so that it will actually shorten my list. So I go from 70 to 69 elements, essentially getting rid of 18. That null value is no longer there. It just skips right to the section. Now that I've done that, I can now get rid of my view templates. So I need to ask these guys, are you a view template? And I produce this list. You can see I get trues and falses, right? So whether it is a view template, and then I can use filter by Boolean mask to filter this list down to only get the views that are not view templates. So if I ask these guys, are you a view template? All of them should be false. Now that I have my list of views, you can see 58 views, not view templates or anything else. I can now start to get the views that I need to set the scope box. So I'm going to ask these elements to get a parameter value by name. Here, I'll specify the out elements. The out elements are not view templates, whereas the in elements would be view templates. And here, I actually want to use a string value that is an input so that my user can do this within Dynamo Player just as I did. And I'm going to rename this to say, specify the instance parameter to filter views by. Then we can tell this to be view name. This must be case sensitive. The way that I like to let my user know this is by adding a note which we can add actually by doing Control W or going up to Edit and pinning this to the node. That will create a little description, and I like to tell the user that this is case sensitive. Parameter, oh my goodness, name must match exactly. And that way they know exactly that they need to type it as it is. And here we go. Now I have all of my view names or any other instance parameter that my user specifies that I can now start to filter by. So I want to get the string contains another node that I specify with a string. So specify common value of instance parameter of views to get scope box. Maybe I'll just say to make this a little bit more concise. Specify common values of views to get scope box. There we go. And I will search for, let's just say, in this case, just to test, zone A. Once again, unless we build it in, we do need to be case sensitive. And we should get some trues and falses here. So if I look down my list, here we go. We get some trues over in the 40s. So if I look down at the 40s, we're starting to get those zones. So starting to get that filter to work here. So now that I have that, a little bit of housekeeping, I do like to make my nodes that are inputs in pink groups here. So I will just go ahead and create these as pink groups and double check that I have made these as inputs. Just once again, a little bit of housekeeping. So now I can go ahead and filter these views by this value. So do my views have an instance parameter, in this case view name, that contains the value that my user specifies, in this case zone A. So if I start to look at what's happening here with my in, do they pass the filter? You can see we have 9 views, all of which have zone A in the name. So now I have my 9 views. Now I can set the scope box. So additionally, I need to get the scope boxes in my project. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy over the code block with category my name and get scope boxes. And in this scenario, I once again want to filter these elements by their element name. It will always be their element name. Scope boxes don't really have any other parameters, so this is what I would want my users to be able to specify. And does that element name, I want to compare X and Y, does it equal, once again, a string that my user specifies? In this case, zone A will work. And you can see I have 2 scope boxes. One of them equals zone A. The other one is zone B. So it does not equal zone A. And now I can filter my scope boxes. And I now have the scope box here coming out of my input, my in list rather, of my output, my filter by Boolean mask, that matches this scenario, has the name of zone A, or the value that my user specifies. So I will update the input value of this string, and I will say specify name of scope box to set. Now, once I've done that, I can now take this scope box and set it to these 9 views. So I need to set. Now before I did get element parameter by name. In this scenario, I'm going to set a parameter by name. So I will come over here. This is my parameter value. This would be my scope box. So I'm just going to go ahead and group all of these and say, this is my scope boxes. Let's just say scope box because it is actually filtered down. Then this would be the elements that I'm setting, right? The actual 9 views. Before I execute this node, I'm going to set this to manual. And the parameter name that I'm specifying, I can actually use a code block. Do not need a string because it is going to be scope box. So I did that by just double clicking on the canvas there. Having a really hard time tonight typing. And when we hit run, we should see a success with only 1. So I need to actually set this to the lacing of longest. And essentially what this will do is it will set all 9 of those views to have that scope box of scope box A. So if we look over at our zone A, we should really see no change from what we did before, right? Zone A, if I change all of these to none, right? So they are not cropped. They don't have a scope box, and we rerun our script here. There we go. You can see that it has set all 9 of our zone A views to be the zone A scope box. Now, bit of housekeeping, just as I've started to do with my scope boxes. A little bit for that reporting piece. We want to report out what is actually getting deleted. Or sorry, what is actually being set, right? We're not deleting anything here. So what is being set in this scenario? Now, if my user comes in and they specify a scope box with a rogue name, so I'm just going to come in here and put something like zone, which does not exist. I should get 2 falses. Neither of them equal zone. They contain zone. They do not equal zone. And I actually will say scope box name must match exactly. Just once again, a little bit of housekeeping with some of my descriptions. Parameter value must match exactly. And I'll say common parameter value. So if they, you see how it actually comes in and it gives me an empty list because neither of them, my in list is actually empty. So what we can do is we can ask, is this list empty? Determines is if the given list is empty. If it is, then we can provide a conditional statement. So we'll use if. If this is true, we want to provide a message to the user. So we can double click and provide a code block that says check scope box and or common view parameter value, or whatever message you want to promote to the user. If not, if that is not true, if the list is not empty, then go ahead and give me the list of the views. Or maybe we want to produce a, so that would actually be my watch. So give me the views and then we will watch it. So this will be views set with scope box. Additionally, we could provide a count. So how many views got updated here? So rather than just giving the list of elements that got updated, we'll produce the count of elements that got updated and another output, and I'll say number of views set with scope box. Now, the order of operations does matter here. I like the number or the list count to be put first, so that it's actually going to be first in line. And that way you don't get your big long list of views, or 9 views that were updated, and then your little itty bitty list count, right? So in this way, we'll ensure that we're going to see the count first, which is kind of the least amount of information. So now I can group all of these. And what I like to do with my reporting is gray. Alrighty, so just for the sake of ensuring this works, let's go ahead and save this to our desktop for the time being. Call this scope box setup. I like to name first what is being updated. We're updating views. And that way, users know exactly where to look in the list for all of the scripts that go with views, if you don't have it set up with your folders that way. One last thing we need to do is set our outputs here. And I'll just check all of my pink nodes just to make sure that they are inputs. I already checked the other two. So we'll get out of here. We'll save and open up our Dynamo player. Don't believe we have set our B views yet. So we will open up Dynamo player, add our desktop here. I now have this as a drop-down selectable folder. I like to sort this alphabetically here. And you can see, going to specify the view name, zone B, and just to test to see if our catch works, there we go. Check scope box and or common view parameter value. So we need to come in here and write B, run this. We should see 9 views as well as our view crop. I hope that you are able to expedite your view setup in Revit with Dynamo Player. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Dynamo Shorts.